The sterile white corridors of Research Station Delta 9 hummed with an eerie silence as Commander Sarah Chen made her nightly rounds. Her footsteps echoed against the polished floor, the familiar weight of her pulse rifle a constant reminder of the facility's true nature. This wasn't just another corporate research center, it was a prison, though its inmates weren't criminals. There was something far more valuable. Sarah paused outside Containment Cell 17, her breath catching as she observed its occupant through the transparent barrier. The alien woman inside stood nearly 7 feet tall, her crystalline skin shifting through shades of opal and azure as she moved. Like all Luminari, she possessed an otherworldly beauty that had captivated humanity since first contact. But it wasn't her beauty that made her valuable to Exogen Corporation, it was her telepathic abilities. Prisoner A-17, step away from the wall, Sarah commanded, following protocol despite her growing unease with the facility's practices. The Luminari woman, whose true name Sarah had been forbidden from learning, turned slowly, her iridescent eyes meeting Sarah's with a quiet defiance that spoke volumes. "Time for your treatment," Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. She knew what these treatments really were: experimental compounds designed to amplify and weaponize a Luminari's natural telepathic abilities. She'd seen the effects firsthand, watched as proud beings were reduced to tools for corporate warfare. The barrier dissolved with a soft hiss. 2 robotic sentinels flanked the doorway, their weapons trained on the prisoner. It was unnecessary. The neural inhibitor grafted to the base of the Luminari's skull ensured compliance. Still, protocol was protocol. "You're different from the others," the Luminari spoke, her voice carrying the musical resonance characteristic of her species. "You question what they do here." Sarah's hand tightened on her rifle. "No talking. Move to the medical bay." As they walked, Sarah couldn't help but notice how the Luminari's movements remained graceful despite her weakened state. 3 months of experiments had taken their toll, but hadn't broken her spirit. If anything, there was something in her bearing that seemed stronger, more focused than before. The medical bay doors slid open to reveal Dr. Marcus Wells, Exogen's lead researcher, preparing another dose of the enhancement compound. The sickly purple liquid swirled in its vial, seeming to absorb the harsh overhead lights. A-17, right on schedule, Wells smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Commander Chen, secure the subject." Sarah guided the Luminari to the examination chair, trying to ignore the way the alien's skin trembled at her touch. The restraints activated automatically, binding wrists and ankles with unbreakable smart metal. "You know this is wrong," the Luminari's words echoed in Sarah's mind, bypassing her ears entirely. Sarah stiffened. The neural inhibitor should have prevented any telepathic communication. Wells approached with the injector, his excitement barely contained. "This new formulation should increase telepathic range by at least 300%. Imagine the military applications. Whole battlefields controlled by a single operator." As he pressed the injector to the Luminari's neck, Sarah saw something change in the alien's eyes. The opalescent irises blazed with an inner light, and suddenly every piece of loose equipment in the room began to vibrate. "Commander, the inhibitor readings are spiking." Wells scrambled to check his monitors. This shouldn't be possible. The Luminari's restraints exploded outward as a wave of pure telepathic force filled the room. Sarah was thrown against the wall, her rifle clattering away. Through blurred vision, she watched as Wells collapsed, clutching his head. The Luminari rose from the chair, her crystalline skin now pulsing with bands of light. "For 3 months," she spoke, both aloud and directly into their minds. "I let you experiment on me. I let you think your technology could contain me. But I was learning, adapting, growing stronger." Sarah struggled to her feet, her training warring with her conscience. The alarm klaxons remained silent. The Luminari was somehow blocking the security systems. "You." The alien turned to Sarah, those brilliant eyes seeming to peer into her soul. "You knew this was wrong, yet you followed orders. Why?" Sarah hesitated, then straightened. Because I was a coward. Because it was easier to follow orders than face what we were really doing here. The luminary studied her for a long moment. Truth. Finally, she glanced at Wells' unconscious form. Your corporations think they can turn my people into weapons, but they don't understand what they're dealing with. The treatments didn't enhance my abilities. They taught me how to break your constraints. Security drones burst through the doorway, weapons charged. With a gesture, the luminary sent them crashing into each other. More would be coming. The facility's air would have detected the disturbance by now. Sarah made her decision. She retrieved her rifle and turned to the luminary. The main hangar is 2 levels down. I can help you reach it. Why would you help me now? Because you're right. This is wrong, and I'm done being a coward. Sarah checked her weapons charge. But we need to move fast. Once they realize what's happening. The facility's lights switched to combat red as the main alarm finally triggered. Through the windows, Sarah could see security teams mobilizing in the corridors. The luminary nodded. Lead the way, Commander Chen, and know that when this is over, your act of conscience will be remembered. As they moved out into the chaos of the facility, Sarah realized that this was more than just a prisoner escape. It was the beginning of something larger, a reckoning between humanity's worst impulses and its capacity for redemption. The real question was, how many more would have to suffer before that redemption was achieved? The night shift at Research Station Delta 9 had started like any other. It would end by changing everything. Alarms screamed through Research Station Delta 9 as Sarah and the luminary raced through crimson-lit corridors. Security forces converged from all directions, but they were unprepared for what the alien prisoner had become. With each passing moment, the luminary's powers grew stronger, as if the very act of freedom was amplifying her abilities. 3 squads approaching from the east junction, the luminary warned, her crystalline skin pulsing with waves of blue light. Their minds are aggressive. They've been ordered to use lethal force. Sarah checked her tactical display, impressed by the alien's accuracy. There's a maintenance shaft that runs parallel to this corridor. It'll take us down to the hangar level, but it's tight. My people are more flexible than we appear, Commander. A ghost of a smile crossed the luminary's features. Though I would know your true name if you're willing to share it. Sarah hesitated only briefly. Sarah Chen. I am Niara, the luminary replied, her telepathic voice carrying warmth that her physical one couldn't convey. Among my people, sharing names creates a bond of trust. The maintenance shaft turned out to be little more than a vertical tube filled with power conduits and life support piping. As they climbed down, Sarah could hear security teams searching above them, their boots thundering on metal gratings. They're activating the failsafe protocols, Niara suddenly announced, her voice tight with concern. Dr. Wells, he's awake. He's ordering them to flood the lower levels with suppression gas. Sarah cursed under her breath. The gas was designed to disrupt neural patterns. It would incapacitate them both if they couldn't reach the hangar in time. How long? Minutes. 5 at most. Nara's skin flickered with pulses of worried amber. But there's something else. Something they're trying very hard not to think about. They emerged from the shaft into a dimly lit storage area. Sarah could see the main hangar doors at the far end of the chamber, but reaching them meant crossing an open space with minimal cover. As if reading her thoughts, and perhaps she was, Niara spoke again. You're wondering why they experimented on me, why they chose me specifically. The luminary's eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. It's because I was different even among my own kind. My telepathic abilities were unprecedented. They thought they could replicate it, enhance it, control it. Security drones rounded the corner, their targeting systems locking on instantly. Before Sarah could raise her rifle, Niara made a subtle gesture. The drones froze, then turned and began firing on each other. What they didn't understand, Niara continued as they ran, was that they weren't enhancing anything. Their treatments were breaking down barriers. barriers that exist in all telepaths for good reason. They reached the hangar doors only to find them sealed with emergency lockdown protocols. Sarah moved to the control panel, her fingers flying over the interface. What kind of barriers? The ones that keep us from being overwhelmed by others' thoughts. The ones that prevent us from reaching too deep. Nyara placed her hand on the massive door, and Sarah watched in amazement as the metal began to ripple like liquid. They wanted weapons. Instead, they created something they couldn't possibly control. The door melted away, revealing the hangar bay beyond. But they weren't alone. Dr. Wells stood waiting with an entire platoon of security forces, all wearing neural dampening gear. The scientist's face was twisted with a mixture of fear and fascination. Extraordinary, he breathed, staring at Nyara. The compound has exceeded all projections. But 17, stand down and return to containment. Think of what we could achieve together, willingly this time. My name is Nyara. The Luminari's voice resonated with power, and you have no idea what you've unleashed. The security forces raised their weapons, but Nyara was faster. The air itself seemed to vibrate as she extended her hand. Sarah watched in awe as every armed human in the hangar suddenly went rigid, their eyes widening in terror. I could make you experience every moment of pain and fear you inflicted on me. Nyara's words echoed both aloud and in their minds. I could turn your own nightmares against you, but that would make me no better than you. Instead, the security forces simply collapsed, unconscious but unharmed. Only Wells remained standing, trembling as Nyara approached him. The data, he gasped. All our research is already gone, Nyara replied. I erased it from your systems hours ago. My people will not be your weapons. Sarah spotted movement in the upper galleries, more security forces taking position. We need to move. Now. They sprinted for the nearest shuttle as pulsed rifle fire rained down around them. Sarah's military training took over as she powered up the engines, while Nyara used her abilities to deflect the worst of the barrage. They're activating the hangar shields, Sarah announced, hands flying over the controls. We've got seconds at most. Nyara placed her hands on the shuttle's console, her skin blazing with light. Then let's show them what else these experiments enabled me to do. The shuttle's systems suddenly surged with power far beyond their normal capabilities. They lifted off just as clouds of suppression gas began flooding the hangar. The shields started to materialize above them, but too late. They burst through the narrowing gap into open space, leaving Research Station Delta 9 behind. As they accelerated away from the facility, Sarah glanced at her companion. They'll come after us. Exogen won't just let us go. No, Nyara agreed, her expression thoughtful. But perhaps that's exactly what we need. My people have been passive too long, allowing humans to capture and experiment on us in secret. It's time they learned why that was a mistake. Sarah felt a chill at those words, but also a sense of rightness. She had chosen her side. Whatever came next, she would face it knowing she had finally done the right thing. As the shuttle disappeared into the darkness of space, alarms continued to blare throughout Research Station Delta 9. But they weren't just warning signals anymore. They were a prelude to war. 3 days into their escape, Sarah and Nyara found themselves docked at Outpost Helios, a decrepit mining station on the fringes of controlled space. The station's population consisted mainly of smugglers, fugitives, and others who preferred to avoid official attention, perfect for 2 fugitives trying to stay off Exogen's radar. Sarah watched as Nyara meditated in their small rented quarters, the Luminari's crystalline skin shifting through subtle patterns of deep blue and violet. The alien's power had continued to grow since their escape, but so had the toll it took on her. The experiments changed more than just my abilities. Nyara spoke without opening her eyes, clearly sensing Sarah's concern. My entire neural structure is evolving, adapting. Sometimes I can feel the thoughts of everyone on this station, pressing against my consciousness like waves against a shore. Is there anything I can do to help? Sarah asked, checking the security feeds she'd hacked into. So far, there was no sign they'd been followed. Naira's eyes opened, their iridescent depths seeming to hold entire galaxies. You already help more than you know. Your mind is ordered, disciplined. It helps me focus when the chaos threatens to overwhelm me. Before Sarah could respond, their room's ancient comm unit crackled to life. A text-only message scrolled across its screen. Know what you stol. Meaty. Docking Bay 7. 180 Come alone. It's not Exogen, Nyara said immediately, rising to her feet with fluid grace. The thought patterns are different. Whoever sent this, they're shielding themselves from me somehow. Sarah checked her modified pulse rifle, ensuring its charge was full. Could be privateer bounty hunters. Exogen's probably offering a fortune for your return. No. Nyara's skin rippled with patterns of deep crimson, a sign of distress Sarah had learned to recognize. There's something else. Something familiar about the presence I sense. We need to go. We need to run, Sarah countered. We can be off this station in 10 minutes. And go where? Nyara's voice carried an edge of frustration. We can't keep running forever. Whatever Exogen did to me, I need answers, and whoever sent this message might have them. An hour later, they approached Docking Bay 7 with careful steps. The bay appeared empty except for a single sleek vessel that practically screamed private military to Sarah's trained eye. As they entered, shadows moved at the far end of the chamber. Hello, sister. A figure stepped into the light, and Sarah felt her jaw drop. It was another luminary, but unlike Nyara's opalescent beauty, this one's crystalline skin was shot through with veins of midnight black. Or should I say, successful experiment? Kailara? Nyara's shot echoed both mentally and verbally. They told me you were dead, that the treatments had killed you. Almost did. Kailara moved closer, her movements carrying the same lethal grace as Nyara's. But then I learned to embrace what they'd made me into. What they're making all of us into. More figures emerged from the shadows, other luminary, all bearing the same dark veining in their crystalline skin. Sarah counted at least 6, each radiating power that made her combat instincts scream in warning. You're working for them, Nyara realized, horror creeping into her voice. Willingly. Working with them, Kailara corrected. You felt it, haven't you? The power they've unlocked in us. We're no longer limited by the old constraints, the old fears. We can be so much more. We can be weapons, Nyara spat. Tools for their wars. We can be gods. Kailara's eyes blazed with an inner darkness. Join us, sister. Help us guide humanity toward a better future, under our protection, our control. Sarah felt the air grow heavy with psychic energy as the two sisters faced each other. The other altered luminaries spread out, cutting off any escape route. The treatments didn't just break down barriers, Kailara continued. They freed us from outdated moral limitations. The ability to not just read minds, but reshape them. To not just sense emotions, but control them. This is evolution, sister. This is corruption, Nyara countered, her skin pulsing with waves of silver light. And I won't let it spread. The battle that erupted was like nothing Sarah had ever witnessed. Waves of telepathic force collided in the air, creating visible distortions in reality itself. The altered luminary attacked as one, their combined power overwhelming. But Nyara stood firm, drawing on abilities that made her earlier displays seem trivial. Sarah found herself caught in the crossfire, her military training almost useless against enemies who could attack with thought alone. But years of combat experience had taught her to adapt. She noticed that the altered luminary had to focus intently to maintain their psychic attacks. They weren't invincible. Her rifle barked, the charges modified to emit neural disrupting pulses. 2 of the dark-veined luminary fell, their concentration broken. Nyara seized the advantage, her power surging outward in a wave that sent the others staggering. You're stronger than I expected, Kailara admitted, genuine respect in her voice. The latest treatments must be even more effective than ours were. Think what we could accomplish together. I've seen what you've accomplished, Nyara replied sadly. The experiments didn't free you, sister. They trapped you in darkness. The battle resumed with renewed intensity. Sarah fought to keep the other luminary at bay, while Nyara and Kilara engaged in psychic warfare that threatened to tear the docking bay apart. Warning klaxons began blaring throughout the station as systems overloaded under the psychic assault. We have to end this, Sarah shouted, ducking behind a cargo container as reality warped around her. The station's structure can't take much more. Nyra's response was to gather her power for one final assault. Her skin blazed with pure light as she confronted her sister. I'm sorry, Kilara, but this has to stop. The resulting telepathic blast knocked everyone off their feet. When Sarah's vision cleared, she saw Kilara and her followers lying unconscious, the dark veining in their skin notably faded. I couldn't undo what was done to them, Nyara said quietly, helping Sarah up. But I could contain it, suppress it. They'll live, but their enhanced abilities are dormant. Sarah checked the station's systems. They were already getting emergency alerts about exogen ships approaching. We need to go, now. As they raced back to their shuttle, Sarah's mind raced with implications. How many more altered luminari were out there? What was Exoden's ultimate goal? And how long could they stay ahead of both the corporation and its enhanced agents? One look at Nyara's determined expression told her they'd find out together. The real war was just beginning. The refugee camp on Europa 7 sprawled across the moon's icy surface like a wound in the landscape. Sarah watched through their shuttle's viewport as hundreds of displaced luminari moved through the makeshift streets, their normally bright crystalline skin dulled by hardship and fear. After their encounter with Kilara, she and Nyara had tracked down this secret sanctuary, hoping to find allies among those who had escaped Exogen's experiments. So many, Nyara whispered, her voice heavy with emotion. I knew they were taking our people, but this, her skin rippled with patterns of deep indigo, grief made visible. Sarah understood. The camp held thousands of luminari, each with their own story of capture, experimentation, and desperate escape. But something wasn't adding up. How did they all get here? Even with help, moving this many people in secret would require resources, urbanization. An elderly luminary named Vex approached their shuttle as they landed. His crystalline skin was weathered, marked with patterns that spoke of great age and wisdom. Welcome, Nyara. We've been expecting you. The camp's command center was housed in an abandoned mining facility, its walls covered in holographic displays showing surveillance feeds and data streams. Sarah's military training noted the sophisticated security systems and strategic positioning. This was more than a refugee camp, it was a fortress. The treatments you endured, Vex began once they were seated, were the culmination of decades of research. Exogen didn't create their program, they inherited it. From who? Sarah leaned forward, her instincts telling her they were about to uncover something big. From us. Vex's admission sent a shock through the room. Or rather, from a faction within our own government that believed we needed to evolve to survive. Nyara's skin pulsed with bands of shocked white. What are you saying? 50 years ago, our scientists discovered that our telepathic abilities were actually a fraction of their true potential. Natural barriers in our minds prevented full access, barriers that evolved for good reason. Some believed breaking those barriers was the key to our species' advancement. Others, like myself, saw the dangers. The Civil War, Sarah realized. Historical records mentioned a conflict that had devastated luminary society decades ago, but details were scarce. It wasn't about resources or territory. No, Vex confirmed. It was about the future of our species. The reformists lost the war, but some escaped, taking their research with them. They found eager partners in human corporations who saw the potential for weaponization. Nyara stood abruptly, her skin crackling with agitated energy. You knew. You knew what they were doing to us, and you did nothing. We did everything we could. Vex's calm facade cracked. This camp isn't just a refuge, it's a resistance. We've been fighting Exogen and their allies for years, trying to shut down their programs without starting another war. Sarah's tactical mind was already racing ahead. The enhanced luminari we encountered, Kelara and the others, they're not just experiments. They're soldiers for whoever continued the reformist program. Yes, Vex manipulated a holographic display showing facilities across known space. Exogen is just one arm of a much larger organization. The treatments you received, Nyara, represent their most successful attempt to create controlled enhancement. But there's something else. The display changed, showing neural scans. Sarah didn't need medical training to see the progression. Patterns of increasing complexity, spreading like roots through the brain. The changes aren't stopping, Nyara said quietly. I can feel it. Every day, the barriers break down further. The power grows stronger. And harder to control, Vex added. Previous subjects, the power eventually consumed them, drove them mad. Kylara and her group were only stable because they surrendered to the darkness, letting it reshape their minds. But you're different, Sarah turned to Nyara, understanding dawning. You're fighting it, maintaining your identity, which makes you unique, Vex concluded, and potentially the key to everything. A warning klaxon suddenly blared through the facility. One of Vex's assistants rushed in, their skin pulsing with urgent patterns. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Exogen signatures. How did they find us? Sarah was already moving, combat training kicking in. They didn't. Nahara's voice was strange, distant. Her eyes had taken on an otherworldly glow. They followed us. My power, it's like a beacon to the others. The enhanced ones, I've led them right to you. Vex was already mobilizing the camp's defenses, but Sarah could see it wouldn't be enough. Not against enhanced luminari and Exogen's military forces. We need to leave, she started, but Nyara shook her head. No, I'm tired of running. Tired of watching our people suffer. Her skin began to glow with increasing intensity. You showed me the truth, Vex. Now I know what I have to do. Nyara. Sarah reached for her, but stopped at the look in those iridescent eyes. The reformists were right about one thing, Nyara said softly. We are capable of so much more. But they were wrong about how to achieve it. The barriers aren't meant to be broken. They're meant to be transcended. Before anyone could stop her, Nyara reached out with her power, not to attack, but to connect. Sarah felt it wash over her like a warm wave. A telepathic link extending to every luminari in the camp. But unlike the brutal invasiveness of the enhanced soldiers, this touch was gentle, supportive, awakening rather than overwhelming. I understand now, Nara's voice echoed in all their minds. The treatments didn't give me power, they taught me how to share it, how to help others find their own strength. Through the facility's windows, Sarah watched in awe as thousands of luminari began to glow, their dulled skin regaining its crystalline luster. The power that Exogen had tried to force through violence was emerging naturally, called forth by Nyara's example. The enemy ships were entering orbit, but they were about to face something unprecedented, an army of luminari awakened to their true potential, led by someone who had transformed suffering into strength. Sarah checked her rifle's charge and smiled. The real battle for the future was about to begin, and this time, they were ready. The skies above Europa 7 erupted into chaos as Exogen's fleet descended through the moon's thin atmosphere. Dropships screamed toward the surface, carrying platoons of heavily armed troops and dark-veined enhanced luminari. But the refugee camp was no longer just a collection of frightened survivors, it had become an army. Nyara stood at the center of it all, her crystalline form radiating pure energy that connected every luminari present in a vast telepathic network. Through their shared consciousness, Sarah could feel a transformation taking place. Each former prisoner and refugee was awakening to abilities they never knew they possessed. guided by Nyara's understanding of how to transcend their natural limits without losing themselves to darkness. They're deploying neural dampening fields, Sarah reported, watching tactical displays light up with threat warnings. Standard containment protocol. Nyara's smile held a hint of sadness. They still don't understand. What I've awakened can't be contained by technology anymore. As if to prove her point, the first wave of dampening fields simply dissolved when they contacted the glowing barrier of telepathic energy surrounding the camp. Exogen's troops hit the ground hard, clearly expecting to find easy targets. Instead, they met a unified force of luminari, each one shining with newfound power. The battle that followed defied description. Enhanced shock troops led by Kilara's dark vein followers charged forward, their corrupted abilities lashing out like psychic weapons. But where before such attacks would have devastated normal luminari, now they met a wall of unified resistance. Every attempt to invade minds or overwhelm wills was turned back by the collective strength Nyara had awakened. Sarah found herself fighting alongside beings who hours ago had been refugees. Her modified rifle complemented their abilities perfectly. Where they created openings in the enemy's defenses, she struck with precision. The former prisoners moved with coordination that would have made elite military units jealous, their shared consciousness allowing perfect tactical awareness. The enhanced ones, Vex called out, his aged form now radiating surprising strength. They're trying to break through to Nyara directly. Through the chaos of battle, Sarah spotted them, a squad of dark-veined luminari, moving with terrible purpose, led by Kilara herself. Their corrupted powers carved a path through the defenders, the darkness in their crystalline skin seeming to absorb light itself. Let them come, Nyara's voice resonated through the telepathic link. It's time to end this. Sarah fought her way to Nyara's position, arriving just as Kilara's group broke through. The two sisters faced each other again, but this time was different. Where before their confrontation had been a clash of raw power, now it felt like opposing forces of nature. Look at what you've done. Kilara's voice held a mix of awe and rage. You've ruined everything. We could have been gods. We were never meant to be gods, Nyara replied softly. We were meant to be whole. The enhanced luminari attacked as one, their corrupted powers combining into a tsunami of psychic force. But Nyara stood firm, and through her, the entire community of awakened luminari stood with her. Their unified consciousness met the dark power and began to transform it, like light penetrating shadows. Sarah watched in amazement as the dark veining in the enhanced luminari's skin began to crack and fade. One by one, they fell to their knees, the corruption being purged from their systems. Only Kilara remained standing, fighting against the inevitable with desperate strength. Sister, Nyara reached out, both physically and mentally. Let me help you. You can't change what I've become. Kilara gasped, darkness swirling around her like a storm. No, Nyara agreed, but I can help you change yourself. Their hands met, crystal touching crystal, and the transformation that swept through Kilara was beautiful and terrible to witness. The darkness that had taken root in her being was not simply destroyed, it was transformed, integrated, turned from a source of corruption into a foundation for genuine strength. Above them, Exogen's ships began to retreat. Their enhanced soldiers were being restored to their true selves, their weapons proved useless against the unified power of an awakened people, and their plans for weaponization were crumbling before their eyes. But victory brought new challenges. Sarah could see it in Nyara's eyes as she helped her sister stand. This was just the beginning. Exogen was only one corporation, and the knowledge of how to corrupt luminary abilities still existed. More importantly, thousands of transformed beings now had to learn to live with abilities that had previously been the stuff of legends. What now? Sarah asked, as the dust of battle began to settle. Nyara looked out over the gathered luminari, their crystalline forms shining with healthy light, their minds linked in a network of mutual support and understanding. Even the former enhanced soldiers were being welcomed, helped to adjust to their restored states. Now, Nyara said, "We build something new. Not a weapon, not a tool for power, but a community. A way of living that honors both our potential and our responsibility to use it wisely." Kylara, her skin now showing healthy patterns of light and shadow, nodded slowly. "We'll need help, teachers, guides for those still struggling with the change. And protection," Sarah added. "Exogen and others will try again." "Then it's fortunate," Nyara smiled, taking both their hands, "that we have warriors, teachers, and bridges between our peoples right here." As the three of them stood together, human, awakened luminary, and reformed enhanced, Sarah realized that the real story wasn't about experiments or escape anymore. It was about transformation, not through force or artificial means, but through understanding, connection, and choice. The future they would build wouldn't be easy, but as she looked at the unified community around them, Sarah knew it would be worth fighting for. The age of exploitation was ending. The age of awakening had begun. 6 months after the Battle of Europa 7, the transformed refugee camp had evolved into something unprecedented. Haven City, a thriving metropolis where Luminari and humans lived and worked together. Crystal spires rose from the moon's icy surface, their surfaces alive with patterns of light that reflected the unified consciousness of its inhabitants. At its heart stood the Awakening Center, where Nyara and her reformed sister Kylara helped others understand and control their emerging abilities. Sarah walked through the city's luminescent streets, marveling at how much had changed. Former Exogen security officers now trained alongside Luminari peacekeepers, learning to combine tactical expertise with telepathic awareness. Scientists from both species collaborated in new research centers, studying the positive applications of enhanced abilities for healing and growth rather than warfare. Still adjusting to the glow, Nara's familiar presence touched Sarah's mind before she physically appeared, her crystalline form now permanently radiating a subtle light that spoke of mastered power. Among other things, Sarah smiled, gesturing to the neural interface she now wore, a gift from the Luminari that allowed her to participate in their shared consciousness while maintaining her human identity. "Never thought I'd be comfortable with thousands of others in my head." "You've helped them as much as they've helped you," Nyara observed as they walked. "Your military experience, your understanding of human nature, it's been invaluable in preventing conflicts before they start." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message through the city's unified network. Kylara's mental voice carried tones of concern. "Council chamber. Now, we have a situation." They found Kylara and Vex in the crystalline chamber that served as Haven's governing center. Holographic displays showed multiple approaching vessels, but these weren't Exogen ships. "Luminari warships," Vex explained grimly. "The Conservative Council has finally decided to intervene." Sarah studied the tactical display with growing concern. The ships were heavily armed, clearly prepared for combat. "They're not here for peaceful negotiation, are they?" "No." Kylara's skin flickered with worried patterns. "They see what we've built here as a threat to their control, the very thing they fought against in the Civil War, the evolution of our species, happening naturally, peacefully." "They're afraid," Nyara added softly. "I can feel it from here. Afraid of change, afraid of losing their power, afraid of what we represent." The approaching fleet's commander broadcast their demands. Haven was to be disbanded, its inhabitants separated and returned to their respective worlds. Enhanced abilities were to be suppressed, and all research destroyed. They had 1 hour to comply. They don't understand, Sarah realized. They think this is like the Civil War, like Exogen's experiments. They don't see that what's happened here is completely different. Nyara nodded, her expression resolute. "Then we'll show them." She turned to the gathered council members, her voice carrying through both air and mental link. "Prepare the city, not for battle, for welcome." What followed was unlike anything in either species' history. As the Conservative fleet moved into position, Haven's inhabitants enacted Nyara's plan. Every crystal spire in the city began to glow, their light forming patterns that reached into space itself. Through their unified consciousness, amplified by the city's architecture, they extended an invitation that couldn't be ignored. The conservative commanders found their telepathic barriers gently but inexorably dissolved, not by force but by an offer of understanding. Through the link, they experienced firsthand what Haven had achieved, not the dangerous evolution they feared, but a natural awakening guided by wisdom and compassion. Sarah watched from the council chamber as realization spread through the enemy fleet. She felt the moment when fear began to transform into wonder, when understanding replaced suspicion. The weapons powered down, the threats ceased, and slowly, inevitably, the ships began to land. "They'll need time to adjust," Kylara observed as conservative leaders were welcomed into the city. "Their entire worldview is being challenged." "Time we can give them," Nyara agreed. "What matters is that they're willing to learn." The integration of the conservative luminari marked a turning point. Where Exogen had tried to force evolution through chemicals and coercion, where the Civil War had sought to impose change through violence, Haven demonstrated a different path: transformation through choice, understanding, and unity. New challenges emerged, of course. Other corporations still sought to exploit luminary abilities. Some humans feared the implications of such powerful beings living among them. Conservative holdouts warned of catastrophic consequences. But Haven stood as living proof that fear could be overcome, that different species could not only coexist but flourish together. Sarah found Nyara later that evening, standing on one of the crystal spires overlooking the city. The former prisoner's crystalline skin shimmered with contentment as they watched humans and luminari moving through the glowing streets below. "Did you ever imagine this?" Sarah asked, feeling the harmonious pulse of thousands of minds linked in peaceful cooperation. "When you were in that cell, did you think any of this was possible?" "No," Nyara admitted. "Back then, I only wanted to survive, to escape. But you showed me something important, Sarah. You showed me that humans weren't just captors or experiments. That some would stand up for what's right, even at great personal cost." "And you showed us that power doesn't have to corrupt," Sarah replied. "That the most profound changes come not through force, but through understanding." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Haven's lights reflect off Europa 7's icy surface. In the distance, new crystal spires were rising, built by human and luminary architects working in perfect synchronization. Each structure was both beautiful and functional, designed to enhance the telepathic network that bound the community together. "We're not finished," Nyara said finally. "There will be other challenges, other fears to overcome." Sarah smiled, feeling the strength of their united community through her neural interface. "Then we'll face them together. Isn't that what Haven is all about?" Above them, the stars shone brilliantly in Europa 7's thin atmosphere. Somewhere out there, other frightened beings, human and luminary alike, were waiting to discover that evolution didn't have to mean destruction, that power didn't have to corrupt, and that the future belonged not to those who fought hardest, but to those who dared to understand. Haven's lights pulsed in harmony with its inhabitants' shared consciousness, a beacon of hope in the darkness of space. The story that had begun in a prison cell had transformed into something far greater, a new chapter in the history of both species, written not in battle or blood, but in light and understanding. The Age of Awakening continued, and its light would only grow stronger. 1 year after Haven's confrontation with the conservative fleet, the city had become more than just a sanctuary, it was a symbol of hope across the galaxy. Sarah stood in the newly completed Unity Chamber, watching as another group of refugees arrived through the quantum portal. These weren't just luminary anymore, humans who had been caught in corporate experiments, other telepathic species who sought understanding, all found their way to Haven. Nyara, now serving as Haven's lead guardian, greeted each arrival personally. Her crystalline form had evolved further, her skin now containing patterns that seemed to reflect the combined wisdom of all those she had helped awaken. Through their neural link, Sarah felt the gentle way she welcomed each newcomer into their shared consciousness. The exogen files were right about one thing, Kylara remarked, joining them at the portal. Her own crystalline form now held a unique pattern of light and shadow, testament to her journey from corruption to balance. They said my sister would change everything. They just didn't understand how. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted as a particular group emerged from the portal, former corporate scientists, their faces marked with guilt and fear. Once, they had been part of programs attempting to weaponize luminary abilities. Now they came seeking redemption. Welcome to Haven, Nara's voice carried both authority and compassion. You'll find no judgment here, only the opportunity to help repair what was broken. Sarah watched as the scientists were led away to the integration center, where they would learn to use their knowledge for healing rather than harm. It was a scene that had played out countless times over the past year, each instance reinforcing Haven's core principle, transformation through understanding. A sudden ripple through the shared consciousness drew everyone's attention. Vex, his aged form now rarely seen outside the council chamber, was broadcasting an urgent message. Multiple quantum signatures detected. Something big is coming. In the command center, holographic displays showed massive distortions forming in the space around Europa 7. Sarah's tactical training recognized the pattern, a coordinated arrival of capital ships. Not exogen, she noted, studying the signatures. These are different. The Stellar Consortium, Kylara identified, her expression grim. The combined military might of 17 human worlds. They finally decided to address the Haven situation. Through their neural link, Sarah felt the city's inhabitants respond to the threat, not with fear, but with calm determination. The lessons of the past year had taught them all that confrontation wasn't the only path to resolution. Massive vessels began emerging from quantum space, their weapons arrays powered but not yet active. A transmission cut through all frequencies. Haven Colony, this is Admiral Chen of the Stellar Consortium. Your experiment in human luminary integration has been deemed a potential threat to galactic stability. You will surrender control to consortium authorities or face immediate military response. Sarah started at the name. Chen, he's my father. Niara touched her friend's shoulder gently. Then he's the perfect person to help us demonstrate what Haven truly represents. What followed was not the military confrontation the consortium expected. Instead of raising defenses, Haven opened itself completely. Through the city's vastly expanded telepathic network, amplified by its crystalline architecture, they extended an invitation to understand. Admiral Chen, expecting resistance, instead found himself and his command staff experiencing firsthand the reality of Haven. Through the neural link, they witnessed the healing of broken minds, the peaceful cooperation of former enemies, the advancement of both species through mutual understanding rather than force. Impossible, the Admiral whispered, but Sarah heard the wonder breaking through his military discipline. Not impossible, she replied to her father through the link, just different from everything we were taught to fear. The consortium fleet hung motionless in space as its leaders grappled with what they were experiencing. Through the shared consciousness, fears were addressed, questions answered, and understanding grew. They had come expecting to find a threat to contain. Instead, they found a model for the future. Hours later, in Haven's council chamber, Admiral Chen faced his daughter and her luminary allies. His voice carried the weight of authority, but also newfound respect. What you've built here, it changes everything. The consortium's mandate was to maintain stability, but perhaps our definition of stability was too narrow. Haven isn't just a city, Nyara explained. It's proof that evolution doesn't have to mean conflict. That power can be guided by wisdom rather than fear. The corporations that tried to weaponize luminary abilities, Kylara added, they never understood that true strength comes from unity, not dominance. The Admiral's eyes met his daughter's. And you knew this all along, when you helped that first prisoner escape. Sarah smiled, feeling the warmth of Haven's shared consciousness flowing through her neural interface. I knew something was wrong with what we were doing. Nyara showed me there was another way. Haven showed us all there was another way. The integration of the Stellar Consortium marked the beginning of Haven's final transformation. What had begun as a refuge for escaped prisoners became a model for galactic civilization. The crystalline spires of the city were replicated on other worlds, each one a center for healing, learning, and growth. Former corporate facilities were transformed into awakening centers where both humans and Luminari could safely explore their potential. The scientists who had once sought to weaponize abilities now worked to understand and nurture them. Even the conservative Luminari, seeing the success of Haven's approach, began sending their youth to learn. One evening, exactly 1 year after the consortium's arrival, Sarah found Nyara in the Unity Garden. The former prisoner, now a beacon of hope for countless beings, was teaching a group of children, human and Luminari together, how to safely touch the shared consciousness. "I remember when you could barely control your own abilities," Sarah remarked as the children ran off to practice. "Now look at you, teacher, leader, legend." Nyara's crystalline skin rippled with amusement. "We're all teachers now. Every story of healing, every moment of understanding, builds the future we hoped for." They looked out over the city that had grown from their desperate escape. Haven's lights pulsed in harmony with its inhabitants' shared consciousness, a testament to what could be achieved when fear was replaced with understanding, when power was guided by wisdom, when different species chose to grow together rather than apart. "It's not finished," Sarah noted, feeling new arrivals through the quantum portal, sensing more minds joining the great network of consciousness that Haven had become. "The work goes on." "It will always go on," Nyara agreed. "But now we walk the path together, in light rather than darkness." Above them, the stars shone down on a city that had become more than its founders had ever dreamed, not just a haven for the lost, but a beacon for all who sought to understand what was possible when hearts and minds united in common purpose. The story that had begun in a prison cell, with an act of conscience and a leap of faith, had transformed into a legacy that would guide generations to come. In Haven's light, the future was not something to fear, but something to create together, one awakened soul at a time. And so the gathering of light continued, growing stronger with each passing day, reaching out across the stars to touch all who dreamed of a better way. The end was just another beginning.